Thanks for joining me on the Peace and Parenting podcast. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome back to the Peace and Parenting podcast. I'm Michelle, and I am so glad you're here. I really want to talk about this idea around parenting advice. And obviously, I'm in the business of giving parenting advice, and I give a lot of parenting advice through my podcast, through social media, in my book, in our communities, and with my one-on-one clients. And I just wanted to help people not feel so bad that parenting advice, when we give it in a general sense, so like here on the podcast or in my Instagram, for instance, or on Facebook, we give it in a general sense. I give it in a sense of like, here's something that works. It might not work for all people all the time. There might be a nuance of a way in which it can work with your child differently than it might work with my child. But it is a framework that generally works for kids. And that we have to be discerning as parents, and we have to be logical as parents to think that, the advice that's given online and here in this podcast is general advice. If I was to sit down with you and dive deeper into certain issues like biting or, pacifier use or a super defiant teenager, I would be able to understand the nuance of your family and understand the nuance of your child and understand what kind of temperament they have and what they respond well to. Some kids respond really well to affection. Others don't really respond to affection. But if you're using this idea of play, and I suggest to use affection, you can always alter that to say, maybe you want to use wrestling instead. Perhaps thumb wars work for your child. So the framework is the same, right? The general advice is the same, but the nuance and the specifics of how it's applied to each child and each family can be so different. So don't feel bad if you try something online that you've heard about online or in a podcast or in my book or in anyone's book, and you go out to use it and it quote unquote doesn't work. It's not because the advice is bad. It's not because the framework or the ideology is off. It's because it can't perfectly apply to every child and every family and every situation, but it doesn't mean it's not good advice for you. It just means it might need tweaking. It might need alteration. It might need to be understood more thoroughly by you or by the person giving it, or there needs to be some nuance there, right? Because parenting is difficult and relationships are difficult and all kids are different. And people will say this all the time. Well, it doesn't work for me because all kids are different. Yes, it doesn't work for you because all kids are different, but there's a part of it, likely, and an aspect of it that will work for you if we could just get to that piece and really deeply understand your child and what they're going through or this specific situation that you're trying to apply it to. Maybe this piece of advice isn't good for this situation that you're trying to apply it to. Perhaps that piece of advice is for a different situation. I had a commenter recently say, well, you keep saying that, none of this will work unless you get rid of punishments. And that, you can't use connected parenting unless you get rid of punishments, but my kid is different. And okay, that's perhaps a valid point. I guess the other idea would be that, punishments just don't work. So there are some things that we can start to get rid of or start to add into our parenting that really are universal, but the way in which you do it is very specific for your family, like punishments, for instance. Some people believe that they can still punish their child. But when we get rid of punishments, a lot of folks, especially who have older kids, will really feel the effects of it. Like their kids might really start to rebel, or they'll really lean into off-track behaviors because they haven't been allowed to. And then we'll get a criticism that getting rid of punishment doesn't work. Also, with this ideology, we have to think, what does work mean? And I've talked about that a lot on the podcast. What does work mean? Work doesn't always mean that you're getting compliant, obedient children. work might mean that your child is going through a process of detoxing out of a world of punishments and into a world of connection. And that might look really different than what you think it should look like. Another idea is that, we give this general advice and sometimes it's followed. And then a lot of people, like I just said, say it doesn't work. But are you gaining a deeper understanding and relationship with your kid? I think that would be like a general overarching theme that you could look at. Are you doing what's in the best interest of that relationship? And I'd say for anybody out there who is doing this work and finding it really hard and questioning whether certain pieces of advice are for them or not for them, if it doesn't feel good for you, if it doesn't feel like you're doing what's very best for your child, then don't do it. I always try to think like, is this the way I would want to be treated, the way I'm trying to treat my kids? And is this the way I would have liked to have been treated as a kid? And if I follow that line pretty much, then I know I'm making good decisions for me and my family, because it's all about being how you want to be treated. It's all about how our kids want to be treated. It's all about treatment, right? Because that treatment creates the relationship. And I don't want to be punished. And it doesn't feel good punishing my kids. So that's the one thing that I really I'm really strict on, I guess, is that nobody likes to feel punished or belittled or shamed or feel bad about themselves. And so in my parenting ideology, I really try to make sure that I'm not making anyone feel bad, and parents feel bad. I don't want you to feel bad about this, parenting method. I don't want you to feel like I'm judging you or that, it's a judgmental place. It really isn't. It's just it's a pro-child place and really a pro-relationship place, and really advocates for the best treatment of children and parents. But sometimes us parents, because we're the adults, we have to take a deeper look at ourselves, and that can be hard. And it can be hard to admit, yeah, the yelling isn't good, I want to get rid of it, or admit I've used shame and I don't want to. And sometimes we get defensive and we see things on social media and we're like, well, I've done that and now I feel bad about myself. But we don't have to take that attitude. We can say, I've done that and that doesn't feel good. And I can tell it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good looking at it and reading it and understanding it. So how can I try to stay away from it? And will I beat myself up if I do yell occasionally, or if I slip up all week and I yell all week? No, we don't have to judge ourselves, but we can use those experiences to help us do better instead of sticking in to our old habits. And so if you're seeing parenting advice and it is speaking to you, but you go home and you try to use it and it doesn't quote unquote work, don't give up. Try it again, or try something else, or try another aspect of connected parenting. Try to listen to the feelings. And let me talk about the aspects that are kind of the general aspects. Listening to feelings, and that looks different for everyone. So when I say listen to feelings and have empathy, some kids respond better to listening to feelings by being calm and quiet. Some kids respond to certain phrases. Some kids don't like any of it. And they're so scared of their feelings that they're going to fight against empathy every step of the way because it feels hard for them. Some children find it patronizing because they've spent 14 years without feeling it ever. And so when they feel it and they feel that empathy, they don't even know what it is. So when I say give empathy to your child when they're having their feelings, you can see how it can be applied in 17 different ways. For the child that's never had the empathy, it can be totally overwhelming and make them feel worse. For the child that is very young, they'll probably ooze into it and eat it all up. And for the child that doesn't like the talking, if you over talk, that's going to be really hard on them. So can you be silent and listen to them? So when we sit down and we're able to really figure out who is your child and who are you really and what speaks to you and what speaks to them, then we're able to apply the tools more precisely. We're able to really hone in on how they work and how they will work for you and your family. So don't beat yourself up and don't think that it doesn't work, because it might. It might just need a little tweak. It might just need a little deeper understanding of the whole situation, and see, what does work mean? Does it mean we get super compliant and cooperative kids? Or does it mean we have big dysregulated emotions, and at the end of those episodes, we feel more connected to our child? And does that connection feel good? And do we understand that that's a moment to offload? And do we have to have those moments of dysregulation in order to get to the juicy, yummy part? Yes, sometimes. And some kids need that experience every day, 2 and 3 times a day. Some kids absolutely have to have it a couple times a week. Other kids need it once a month. And some kids will seemingly present as if they don't need it at all, which is a whole different experience too, where how do we get those kids to get their feelings out, if that's what we're talking about? I hope that somewhere in this podcast, you've better understood maybe what general parenting advice really is and how it can be helpful, and how maybe it does need tweaking, and it's hard to take that general advice and apply it to every kid and every family and every situation. And that, I can't possibly give all of the nuanced pieces of every single type of kid and family. That would be really hard to do that. So me, and I think many other parenting experts, try to give advice that is general, try to give advice that really is a thought, a mindset, a framework, where then you can take and really use it for your family in the best way, because you know your family best. You understand your child's temperament best. They trust you the most. And can you take that parenting advice and really use it to your advantage and not get caught in the weeds around, it being perfect? And I think that's, another piece. We don't have to go down this road, but as parents, many of us want to do the perfect thing for our kids because we think we're messing them up, or we think that we should be the perfect parent. And maybe this is my own conjecture because this is where I'm coming from. But, it isn't perfect. None of it. It's very sticky and icky and hard. And it doesn't always look the way we want it to look. And that's okay. I think that really is okay. So you take that parenting advice that you see and you do your best with it, and you try it. And maybe you try it a few times. And if that general advice doesn't work for you, there's always support to seek. Can I get more help and support to get the more nuanced support that I need? And I'd say in our community, we have our Connected Parent Mastermind, which is an amazing, incredible community. And lots of people have come from the mastermind and spoken on the podcast. You can listen to them. We meet 3 days a week, and you can come to all 3 meetings. It's a great, amazing support. We also have one-on-one coaching, which you get to really dive into the nuanced understanding of your kid and all the tools and how they apply. All right. Thanks for joining me on the Peace and Parenting podcast. I am so glad you are here, and I will see you next time.